Hello everyone and welcome to this very special edition of TTG Face to Face. It's a very happy celebratory occasion today. I'm delighted to be joined by Mundy Cruising's Edwina Lonsdale as the cruise specialist agency celebrates its 50th anniversary very, very soon. Edwina, delighted to have you here. Got a great big smile on your face, as rightly you should do. Congratulations are in order. Yeah, kind of how's it been really? Are you and the team looking forward to celebrating?
Yes, well, it's not quite what we had in mind. This was going to be such a fantastic party year, but of course that hasn't really worked out as we would have expected. Not what we've expected at all, but yeah, we're very excited. 1st of October is the date, and on that day I will be going down to Exeter to see Paul and Judith Mundy, who are the founders of the company. I've got a golden bowl I'm taking with me full of golden coins and all sorts of things. So just to remember that fateful day 50 years ago when they started off actually in Newcastle selling river cruise. So that was the start of the business. Interestingly, we always think of river cruise as something completely new, don't we? But no, there they were looking after KD German Rhine Line way back in 1970.
Fantastic. And I was going to say, can I just start off by saying, you kind of alluded to it there a little bit. How does it feel to be celebrating such a momentous occasion and such a milestone under all this industry and kind of global upheaval? I imagine it's quite a time to be kind of going through that. Is it difficult to kind of balance the celebratory side with the kind of the hard work that you've been doing?
Yeah, I mean, that is an interesting point. But of course, in 1970, I wasn't there. But we were going through turmoil ourselves. So Paul and Jude had a background in passenger shipping, but the assumption was that passenger shipping was over because the jet plane started, and everyone said, "Oh well, there's no future for ships. There's no future for cruise." And Paul he wasn't prepared to accept that. His family company moved over into freight. He wasn't really interested in freight. He says parcels aren't nearly as interesting as people. And also he refused to really believe that there could be an end to something as fantastic as traveling by sea. So they really started up out of a tough and turbulent time. So I think it's probably right, isn't it, that 50 years on, we should also be navigating through turbulent waters, ready for another regeneration of the cruise industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that there's a fantastic history of Mundy on your agency website, actually, which I was reading beforehand, which is exactly says it all. You know, when air travel and package holidays were booming, there was a point where people thought the golden age of cruising was gone, wasn't it? But it's had its absolutely fantastic resurgence, hasn't it, recently? Do you feel like now, obviously, you know, perhaps aside the last kind of 7 months, but we do seem to be, you know, you think about last year and the year before, in a bit of a golden age of cruising, with popularity is going up and up and innovations on board are going up and up. Does it feel like that way for you, Edwina?
Yes, although things have changed so much. I mean, we've had a lot of exciting times, actually. So I came into the industry in the early 80s, and I joined Paul and Jude in 89. So I've been here at this company for a very long time. And that was a really exciting time in cruise because it was just when we were starting off on the series of mergers and acquisitions, and the companies whose names we know today were just beginning to be formed, and there was lots of innovation in terms of build. So really up until then, most of the cruise lines have been operating old ships that had belonged to companies that had subsequently gone under. And they just sort of absorb a ship into the company and say, oh, this is a carnival ship or this is a princess ship, without really identifying exactly what that meant. And it was only really come the 90s with the huge build program that we began to see ships being built specifically for a certain line, and to get those real brand differentiations, which was great. But also we saw the roots of the luxury industry. So you and I were talking earlier about Seadream. They were in the 80s. Then we had Seabourn. So the guy that owns Seadream was there creating Seabourn. Then Silver Sea. Such exciting stuff happening. And of course, so much has grown out of that. And we've seen a sort of new iteration of Seabourn, haven't we? And the extraordinary activity from Regent Seven Seas. So that saw its roots back in the 90s. But then, and again, focusing on the things that really interest me, so quite apart from the big ship operation, in the last few years, we've seen that whole river cruise thing come effectively out of nowhere. And such a significant growth, and again, very much more brand differentiation and identity of what the different cruise lines stand for. And then just sort of coming out now, we've got the whole reiteration of expedition cruise, how exciting that is. And then alongside that, you've had what's been going on with the big ships. I mean, in the 80s, when I joined Paul, we were all really excited about this Royal Caribbean ship that was 80,000 tons. Oh my goodness, it carried
Who'd believe it? Yeah.
1,000 people. We just couldn't believe it. And reading back some of our old issues of Cruise News, so for example, the 25th anniversary issue of Cruise News, then we had a What Does the Future Hold article in there, and there was talk about this strange idea from the Closter family that there was going to be a ship that carried 5,000 people. Can you believe it? But I don't think it'll ever happen.
No, I mean, surely not. Never.
Extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah.
A very exciting industry. Really, I joined during its infancy. I've seen it grow to a completely mature industry now with a very responsible attitude. You and I have spoken before about what a great job the cruise lines have done through this crisis in terms of future planning, future proofing and so forth. So yeah, it's extraordinary. It's still extraordinary.
That was fantastic. I'm exhausted. It feels like I sort of lived the history of cruise through your experiences. It's brilliant. Yeah, can you remember kind of casting your mind back to when you sold your first cruise? Kind of when you joined Paul and Mundy as well right at the start. Kind of what was it like, and what kind of we'll go on to talk about you after taking over the business soon. But kind of what was it that kind of drew you to cruise, and what were you doing at that time of your life that you wanted to work?
Actually, I sold my first cruise before I joined Mundy because I started at Fred Olsen. And we used to look after a lot of different cruise lines then. The first cruise I ever went on was Princess Missouri, which is a Blue Funnel Line cruise, and it sailed out of Singapore down to Bali. Can you believe it? I'd never even flown long haul before. It was just extraordinary. So I was hooked right from then. The magic of waking up in a completely new place every day. When we finished in Bali, I woke up, pulled the curtains, we're in this magical bay. There was that vibrant green scenery. There were tiny little fishing boats coming in, just sailing across the bay. The sun was just coming up. Oh my God, just magical. And before that, we'd been in Singapore, and that was just something else entirely. So it is that magic of seeing so many different places and going to so many different things that has been captivating for me forever and ever. And I did a brief absence from the cruise industry just before I joined Mundy. I went into tour operating, and what I really noticed that I'd lost at that time was that reducing of the connection with the buyer, so the consumer. And as you know, our company, we've really focused on that. So although other companies have gone in other directions, what our focus has always been is that very personal connection with the end user. It's like doing market research every day on your products. Just brilliant.
Yeah, hearing exactly what customers want and what they don't want directly from the horse's mouth, isn't it? Yeah. So you joined Mundy in 89, you said, and then yourself and your husband Matthew took over in 99. So 10 years.
99, we did a management buyout from Paul and Jude. Yes, so 20 years ago.
Fantastic. And what made you want to kind of both take that leap?
So I had worked for Paul for 10 years, so obviously I was very sort of integrated with the company. It was very important to me. Matthew came from another industry altogether. He was a blue chip advertising. We'd never worked together, so that was really strange. When we were raising the money to buy the company, that was the first time we'd ever been in a meeting together.
What was that like? Was it interesting to see how each other
we were surprised. We didn't know it would be, but we have very different skill sets, and that's been really the secret of our success going on. We don't really tread on each other's toes. Matthew's very creative. He's a big thinker. He really holds the management team to account when they're proposing things. He's much less hands-on than I am. So we've got that combination of marketing, sort of plane marketing through and through, and then travel expertise. And we both share that passion for cruise. So it's the perfect combination.
Fantastic. And in terms of kind of how fast the company grew after that, can you kind of talk us through kind of some of the main kind of highlights and milestones for you? I imagine there's probably just, so many, isn't there, to kind of pick from, your kind of proudest moments of growing the business.
Yeah, I mean, it is quite, I was sales and marketing director at the company before we owned it, and it is quite a big step from that into managing director, actually. It's quite interesting. I hadn't quite registered. So that big challenge, first of all, with staff management and so forth. So the key thing for us, and I think why Matthew and I work together so well, is that we're completely attuned on what sort of company we want. So it took us a little while to articulate that, but basically we've never aspired to have a huge sort of multi-million-dollar company. That's not what we're about. So it's very much about the personal. It's about having a very close relationship with our staff. It's about employing only staff that really buy into our philosophy. A real premise of kindness, actually, in terms of our relationships with our clients, doing the right thing. And actually also in our relationships with our suppliers, with our cruise lines and so forth. So for us, it's been all about building that reputation, which was Paul's legacy too, and ensuring that we are easy to do business with, that we are honest, that we have high levels of integrity, that we're true to ourselves, that we really believe what we're selling and saying. And the exciting milestones, I suppose, have been those new ships coming on over those years that we've so enjoyed, and of course also our own travel experiences, which have been wonderful.
That's a fantastic segue there, Edwina, because I was going to ask you kind of what your favourite moment on board a ship was. It can be ocean, it can be river, it can be expedition. It's probably an impossible question given how many you've been on, but is there one that particularly stands out for experience or destination, or perhaps something strange happened on it? Are there any that kind of stick in your mind?
I suppose I love the Galapagos. That was a real magical trip for me. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe, having been on safari and done a whole load of wildlife holidays, that you got to this destination where in the evening the expedition leaders, the experts, the guides would say, tomorrow we're going to see so and so and so and so, and there wasn't any question but that you were going to see it. It's not, oh, you might just, or in the distance, or whatever. Every single place was just seething with wildlife, and it is like being in another age, another world. It's a very timeless experience. But actually, having said that, I think my most magical was in the Arctic, seeing polar bears.
Wow, God, you've lived such an incredibly extravagant travel life there.
I know. Yes, the polar bear experience was marvelous. One morning, we were due to go hiking. We were going to have an early start up at 6 a.m. to go on a hike, and then the announcement came over the tannoy. We've seen a polar bear out on the ice, so we're all going to go in the Zodiacs and see if we can get closer to it. And so we got to the edge of the ice. The polar bear came down. It was a mother. She had a cub with her, so she was striding along, just by the water's edge. So we were so close we could see her with the naked eye. We didn't need cameras and binoculars, and the baby was running up behind her and pouncing and falling headfirst into the snow and hiding, and it was just a marvelous experience. The sun was glorious. The scenery absolutely extraordinary, and we had about 2 hours just tracking her, and then the guide said, oh, she's got a whiff of us, the wind's changed, she's a little bit unsettled. So then we zipped back across the bay in the Zodiacs, back on the ship, breakfast on board, just unbelievable, absolutely extraordinary.
Wow.
So yeah, that was a really special day.
That's fantastic, and all of that before breakfast as well. Kind of how else do you spend the rest of your day after that?
I did the polar plunge, actually.
Oh, did you? Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So whenabouts was this trip then, and whenabouts was the Galapagos that you mentioned earlier?
So.
Whenabouts was the Galapagos and the Antarctic trip you just mentioned?
I suppose the Arctic was probably 3-4 years ago. Galapagos about 10 years ago. We're planning to go back Oh, we've got so many plans.
I was going to say that's. I was going to ask you that one later. Actually, where you like to cruise to, but kind of leading on from that, kind of what is it necessarily about cruising that you love so much? Is it the fact that it's this transient kind of, you go to bed in one place, you wake up in another? It's kind of seeing a lot of the world in the comfort of the ship and the service. And is it that? What can you kind of put your finger on what it is that you love about it so much?
Well, I think one of the things is I'm terribly disorganized packer.
Right.
When you do those land tours and you're going somewhere different every day, you have to sort out your luggage. You have those people who are really organized that say, right, on that day I'm going to wear that, and that's on the top, and the next day it'll be that. I absolutely cannot do it, however hard I try. So I just love that blissful arrive, everything out of the suitcase, cares of the world lift from you. There's nothing to worry about. You're not responsible for anything. Someone else is in charge, and you can just sort yourself out. But having said that, I love also the fact that when Matthew and I travel together, Matthew likes to sort of go ashore. If we're somewhere new in the Med, for example, we'll go ashore. He'll walk around for about half an hour. Then he'll say, "Isn't it time for coffee?" So we'll stop for coffee, watch the world go by, and then as far as he's concerned, he's done that place. So he goes back onto the ship, sorts himself out with his book and his, beer and so forth. And I can go off and explore and climb a mountain, or, go around a castle or an art gallery, all those things that I love to do. And that really works well. So we've done it traveling with friends too, that the whole thing about you can go off, you can do your own thing, you don't have to organize it with people, you don't have to worry about, oh, I better do that because that's what they want to do. And then in the evenings, you've got that magical setup where you can all meet. You don't have to agonize over where you're going to eat. You've got all your restaurants there at your fingertips. And if someone just fancies doing something different that night, that works really well too. So yeah, it's just that freedom, that combination of organization and freedom that makes it just such a special experience, I think.
Yeah, oh no, that's fantastic. You summed it up brilliantly, actually. And kind of to bring us kind of into the present now, I just wanted to ask kind of how you think the experience of cruising and selling cruise indeed kind of has changed with everything that's going on now. Kind of what would you say to that?
Well, it will be interesting to see what happens, but as far as we're concerned, in the place that we are, we're very well positioned. So we've certainly seen from our own customer research that people have an inclination now to go for smaller ships. Where they feel that the whole health and safety process will be possible to manage that very efficiently without really the passengers needing to notice. I think there's going to be a lot of focus also on visiting places a little bit more off the beaten track and away from the crowds. I think that's going to really play into something that was already interesting people about authentic travel experiences and over-tourism and sustainability. So I think that there's going to be a real regroup in terms of sustainability. Again, we're going to have much more of a separation of what the small ship operation is like and what the big ship operation is like. And we really are focused on that small ship thing. And I think with this offloading of a lot of old tonnage that most of the cruise lines have taken the opportunity to do during this process, what we're going to see is a real focus on the newer, greener, more technologically brilliant, sustainable fleet. And I think that that's going to be a really important thing going forward, so that as the cruise lines regroup, slow down their builds, think more about their builds, they're going to really focus on that too. That's really good. And I think from a customer point of view, we're going to see two different things there. One, people have really noticed the fact that human connection is important to them. So they're going to take that opportunity to travel with family, to travel with friends, because they've learned how valuable that group is to them. And I think the other thing is that they'll maybe move away from that sort of lightweight, throwaway travel experience and start saying, okay, the experiences I'm going to have, they're going to be really worthwhile. So a bit like empty calories, don't bother with those chips, don't bother with the snacks and so on. Really focus on the fantastic Michelin-starred stuff. Go on your iconic trips that you've always had in your mind. You never know when you might not have the opportunity to do that. So I think what we're going to see is people investing more money in their travel, and really believing in making that special. And I think alongside that, what we're going to see is a real increase in the value of the travel agents, in terms of making sure they're buying the right thing, that they're investing properly, that can really express to them what it's all about. So they may, as always, do their research online, but once they've got thoroughly confused, then they're going to go to the agent that's going to really look after them and make sure that they've identified what they really want to do.
Yeah, no, that was a fantastic summary there. I think it sounds almost like a bit of a rebirth, doesn't it, in terms of investment in tonnage and a bit of environmental stuff, and the fact that people are putting more worth on the value of travel in a cruise. So yeah, that must kind of really G you up to kind of, obviously you've been working really hard on your team and selling greatly as well for this year, but that must kind of give you a bit of chutzpah to kind of keep going into next year.
Exactly.
And
you have to think, oh well, here we are. This is tedious. And it's going on so much longer than we expected, but there's something to work for.
Absolutely, yeah. And with that in mind, then, where will you obviously, you mentioned the Galapagos, you mentioned some fantastic, polar bear experiences. If you could cruise somewhere tomorrow, Edwina, where would it be? The whole world's your oyster. Kind of, we've all been kind of banged up and locked up for quite a while, or locked down even. But where would you want to go? What would be your sort of ideal destination?
I haven't been to Antarctica, so I would definitely want to. That's important to me.
Yeah.
But actually, I've always said this. I've said it to you before. The Med is the place, as far as I'm concerned. I could go back time and time again. I love the Greek islands. Italy is just beautiful visiting from sea. There are those wonderful islands in the Western Med, Corsica, Sicily. What could be better? And right on our doorstep.
Absolutely. Oh, fantastic. And I suppose the final question really was if you could go back to before you took over the business, to your younger self back in '99, what would you say? What advice would you give to yourself, kind of how things will play out? And what would you like to say, or perhaps what would you like to say now to your younger self now, knowing what you know?
I think the important thing is to identify what motivates you. It may be, particularly if you're running your own business, it may be money, but it may not be money. And I think the assumption in the world is always that when you're in business, money is what motivates you. Obviously, you need to make money, you need to pay your salaries, you need to invest in the future, but that's not necessarily your motivation. Your motivation might be a passion for travel, a passion for people, looking after people, and that's what you need to identify really early on, and then that's what you're going to go for.
Fantastic. And I suppose all that to say is happy birthday, happy anniversary to yourselves and Mundy as well, and have some fantastic celebrations, and all the best. Here's the next 50 years.
Oh, thanks so much, Tom. It's been great.